Hello, everyone, and welcome to Just Jules, where I am Just Jules. Today, I'll be reading a piece of work of mine called After a While. Now, After a While was actually inspired by a poem by, I believe her name is Veronica Schaefer, and she was inspired by another poem of the same poem by Jorge something. I can't remember, but I'll link it in the description box below. And when I read that poem, it kind of stuck with me, and then I was inspired to write my own wisdoms from it. And that was an article that was on mycollegepal.com, and it was the fourth most emailed article on the site to this day. It's up there. So I'm quite proud of that accomplishment, and it's something that I would like to share for you. I consider this a living work because I've got about 10 years of wisdom that I haven't written down to add to this poem yet, but I'm going to read to you what I wrote as of its publishing date. And it was published in 2015, my bad. Yeah, it was also published as The College Student versus the Soup Kitchen at mycollegepal.com / JV Stanley on April 10th, 2012. Because I cite sources. So here we go. After a while, this is my take on that format. After a while, the urgency will be gone in circumstances. People that once ignited that spark within us are forgotten by the downtrodden toils and everyday goings-on that play within our mindset. After a while, gilded perspectives will tarnish and will reveal the ugly flaws that crop up if we don't keep them polished. When we hide our true selves to boast of all we have to offer to everyone else, we sadly become more important than the people that matter. After a while, your perception of those close to you will begin to unravel. The fog blocking your point of view will be lifted, revealing what was there, what your heart didn't want your mind to see. After a while, you will realize that what you put into something is what you will get back, whether it is in relationships, friendship, or work. If you put in minimal effort, you'll get minimal results. If you put your all into something, you'll reap the benefits. If you don't reap anything, no matter how much you put into it, after a while, you'll realize that it isn't worth the effort. Then after a while, those who took you for granted will see what they have lost. But if they don't, then it doesn't matter, for you of all people should know your worth. After a while, the grand-scale frivolities will lose their grandeur, and the little things will matter more. If those little things are seriously lacking, the grandiose ones are of little significance. Although they are appreciated gestures, no doubt, it's a realization that it's easier to pull out a checkbook these days than it is to put your heart into anything. Money only solves so many problems. After a while, you realize that hugs are one of the most important and significant forms of reassurance in the world. One can find true peace in the arms of the one who truly loves you, and by someone who is unwavering and unabashed in their love. Holding on to someone speaks more within one brief moment than the extent of this prose. Relish those tender moments and carry them with you, for those memories will bring you strength. After a while, promises will not be kept and are forgotten within the world of more important things, or responsibilities, or simply laziness and uncaring. For those who hold on will have to go and realize that those promises were only fleeting. After a while, hopes only go so high, and then come crashing down like a shooting star. They are brilliant in their glory, blazing across the sky, but suddenly become snuffed out as they reach the atmosphere of reality. The final cry of realization that expectations go above and beyond that sometimes. After a while, familial love will offset the vulnerabilities within this life. However, there are some instances which one will try so desperately to meet the expectations of family and friends and become exhausted by the efforts. In some families, love is not enough and perfection is the core focus. After a while, it puts too much pressure on individuals and extricates individualism from one's soul. Instead of appreciating what is, after a while, an individual can make themselves as clay. One can morph into the image of an unattainable ideal, thereby seeking unattainable approval. After a while, we become consumed with the here and now, and such potential is lost with the day to day routine. After so many nights spent planning with hope in hearts and light in the eyes, eventually leads down the path to disappointment. After a while, you'll realize that once you neglect the importance of here and now, any hope for the future will be lost. After a while, you'll realize that there may be no way to go back. After a while, we see the truth in faults we never knew existed, and those faults we once adored become the thorn within our side. We fail to see them as what they were to us before, enduring qualities, quirks, the unique, unchanging personality of the individual. After a while, we lose the strength of passion within our hearts and instead replace it with passing obligation. We walk briskly past that flame, the flurry of our comings and goings, softly threatening to extinguish that fire. After a while, we become too adjusted, too comfortable with what we have. It becomes boring and our eyes wander. When what we have lost is its splendor within our eyes, the fertile ground upon which where we once trod becomes malnourished, dries, and shrivels, and is carried off, lost within the oblivion of neglect. After a while, we realize that in order to maintain what we have, we must nourish it. The grass isn't always greener. It becomes green so long as we fertilize it. Even more so around a septic tank. Sometimes the hard times and copious amounts of bullshit can be used as fertilizer, which will inevitably create something more beautiful than you could ever have hoped. After a while, you happen upon individuals who are toxic and who do not have your best interest in mind. They destroy your relationships for their selfish purposes. The history of this is where jealousy and possessiveness stem. Sadly, those on the outside can recognize these individuals for who and what they are, while others buy into their niceties and succumb to the siren's call. After a while, you realize that couples don't argue hundreds of times, they argue hundreds of times over the same things. Eventually, if one refuses to change or compromise, then the other will stop trying. They will either learn to live with it or become apathetic. After a while, the songs are sung that are. After a while, the songs sung are played out of tune or not played at all. After a while, you'll realize when someone begins a sentence with "After all that I've done for you," they're trying to use their past good deeds as a means to justify their current bad ones. In the end, this causes you to feel wrong for being upset when you had every right to be, or worse, obligated. After a while, you'll notice the lack of personal responsibility people will inherently have. When their actions are the catalyst of their undoing, blame will be placed on something or other than themselves. It doesn't matter if it's a person, object, the past, or the powers that be. It also does not matter if it's an individual, government, or any particular group. It is humanity's nature to point the finger and place blame on someone or something else. Recognition of wrongdoing or slights is imperative to the cleansing of the soul and the continuation of the freedoms by which we have rightfully attained. Our spirits, our country cannot attain the growth it so desperately needs until someone takes responsibility and acknowledges the problem. Freedom is paid for not with the blood of others, but by our own. After a while, you'll realize that the basis of friendship is not obligation, but the kindness of wanting to do something out of love and compassion, empathy. After a while, you realize that if you do something kind for someone, you'll reap more happiness when you don't expect a return. A thank you helps, though, and should be sufficient enough, but give credit where credit is due. After a while, you'll realize that friendship or love is not based upon what was done in the past. The track record speaks for itself. One wrong should not be the reason for the ending, rather, the history of continuous wrong should be. After a while, you'll realize when you're being used, when the only time someone calls you is when they want something and not simply just to talk. After a while, you'll realize, though, that you do the same thing sometimes. It's so very enlightening to recognize that at any given time, with any given person, there's always a chance that ulterior motives were behind actions, words, thoughts, etc. After a while, you'll understand that some friends have significantly more drama than you do. Your friends sometimes can get overwhelmed, and by them approaching you with it, should not be seen as a burden, rather an honor. You are their strong shoulder in which they can lean, and you probably wear absorbent clothing. But after a while, if there is no reciprocated gesture, the results can be far more damaging to you if you allow it to continue. After a while, you begin to realize that the only thing in your life you have complete control over is yourself and your actions. What others do should not be allowed to affect you. It should instead make you stronger and used as an example to add to your treasure of wisdom. After a while, you will realize that the only people guaranteed to love you for all time are your children, who will love you regardless of how you look and or how much or how little you have. Don't neglect these small hearts that are so easily broken. The loss of love of your child is something that is the emotional equivalent of the apocalypse. It is sad that some could live through that. After a while, you will come to the realization that family is the most important element in your life. It is your lifeline of your history, surrounded by individuals who have known you from the very beginning. After a while, though, those ties begin to fray as each takes upon a family of their own. The intimacy is lost to some degree, but they will continue to see you as the way they always seen you, the portion of you that they remember. After a while, you will start a family as they had. You will come to nurture and care for your relationship, and it will become your entire world, your future history. The intimacy within a marriage or a relationship is one that cannot be replicated through extended family. The intimacy of the person you spent the rest of your life with, the person you create life with, is the family should take precedence. After a while, your family of history will presume to know what is best for you in the ways of life and love. They know you by your faults, stumbling as you've tread through life on your own. Although their best interest is at heart, it is you who determines the outcome of your life. Neither friends nor relatives should influence your life choices or decisions, but their wisdom and insight is unsurpassed. They not only know the history that is you, but have an objective standpoint and love within their hearts. After a while, you will come to terms with the fact that your past has created you, but does not define you. We all have our hidden demons, cased within the fragile glass of ego and memory that sometimes cracks enough to where the past spills out in various states of unpleasantness. We define ourselves by what we have been through, use it as a crutch to justify our actions despite that we know better. We hide behind the trauma and fail to attain that bittersweet release of acceptance. After a while, though, you'll realize that some individuals do not have the capability to overcome those demons. Those demons will either be passed down unconsciously to our children, or they will be the end of who we could be had we the strength to face it. After a while, you will realize that getting over your past is the most difficult task to face. Once we shatter that glass, we are left with the pieces of ourselves. We also realize how broken we already were, merely haphazardly put back together. After a while, perhaps years, you will understand that the past may blind us to the truth unless we have severed the ties of abuse, neglect, and emotional harm. Once the veil lifts and personal thought is back on track after our previous emotional conditioning, we can see the manipulation through clear eyes. The truth only reveals itself when we're not shielding ourselves from it. After a while, you will be able to recognize abuse once you have experienced it. Vivid characteristics will stand out within your mind, and you will see the truth in the most subtle of details. After a while, though, you'll realize that you will need to break the cycle of repetitive strings of abuse. You'll be destined for a string of abusive relationships so long as you continue to ignore the visible signs and disregard your gut instincts. After a while, you will realize that if you ignore your inherent need for personal comfort and companionship, you will come to love yourself and understand that you deserve far more. You cannot find love unless you find it within yourself for yourself. Every life, every heart is precious and should be cherished, not shattered and mutilated. After a while, you will realize that burns and cuts may scar, black eyes can heal, hair can be regrown, and plastic surgery can perform miracles. The devastation of emotional abuse, though, has the potential of eviscerating a soul. Words last longer in the psyche. Empathy is sorely lacking in society. After a while, you will come to the realization that you would rather saw off a limb than endure the horrors of emotional conditioning and abuse. Those wounds last far longer and are a memory that takes years to heal, if at all. After a while, you will realize that love crosses boundaries that can seem unfathomable. True relationships, ones worth having, are ones you have to work for to maintain. After a while, you will realize, however, that the main condition that separates a relationship that will work from a relationship that will fail is the ability to communicate. Countries, empires, leaders have fallen due to their ineptness in communication. Marriages fail, children become estranged, and mountains have crumbled due to the slightest misstep in phrasing. After a while, you will realize that if you allow someone to break a promise, the individual will continue breaking those promises and in turn will lose all their credibility. Same could be said about the promises that you make yourself. After a while, you'll realize that bad habits die hard and no one does a 180 overnight. Sometimes people fall back into the same routine. How much they change is measured by how much they want to. After a while, you'll understand that people will do what they want regardless of how you feel. These individuals care more for a trophy and what is convenient than what is real, but has to be worked for or earned. After a while, you'll realize that when you're lonely, prayer is the best answer. Sometimes God comes through for you in the most peculiar of ways and unexpected of times. After a while, expectations are met with disappointment. We realize that we expect is something we would do ourselves if the situation reversed. Then again, after a while, you'll soon realize after the anger subsides that is the reason we became angry in the first place, and the epiphany strikes. Not everyone thinks as you do. After a while, you'll realize that age does in fact matter, and it is more than just a number. With age comes knowledge, maturity, and wisdom. But no one can walk the same path as you or have the same knowledge, insight, or life experiences as you. Each road traveled by each in this life varies significantly from each other, despite how similar they are, nor how close you are to that person. After a while, we realize that sometimes we cling to those distant individuals within our lives while ignoring the ones who are the closest. After a while, you realize that you don't need someone else to fight your battles for you. The strength of experience should enable you to do so, but it is reassuring knowing you have someone in your corner. After a while, you'll come into contact with individuals who have the power to influence you in ways you would never expect. From the clerk at the gas station to the restaurant manager, from business representatives to corporations, each position you attain can give you a position of power. Some individuals use that power to their advantage. They become arrogant, prideful, and petty. Some include the clerk at the gas station who shortchanged you and the restaurant manager who bawls you out for a mistake on your performance. Then there is the corporation or business that overcharged you on your last statement. All these instances and many more can all affect you in lasting ways. After a while, you will feel angry for these minor slights and the abuse of power, and in turn, feel the urge to do the same to another when you come into a similar position. After a while, you will realize that this behavior is unjustified and unfair. If you work with compassion, you will receive gratitude. If you work with arrogance, you will receive spite and resentment. Those in power can make others happy or make them suffer. Do unto others. After a while, you realize that social media simply reinforces passive aggression, and the impact you want to make fails miserably by the use of this practice. More power goes to the person who tells someone face to face. You will earn respect by telling someone how you feel, regardless of the outcome, whether positive or negative. After a while, you realize that though high school is a thing of the past, real life outside those brick walls carries with it some similarity. You realize that adult bullies are just as bad as the ones in school. In some cases, worse. Time and wisdom made them more clever, gave them more ammunition, a broader vocabulary, and wider resources. After a while, you realize that when acting on impulse when emotions are high, it's better to keep your mouth closed before you react. Take my own advice, Jules. How you feel now isn't necessarily how you will feel later. Don't say it unless it's meant with a clear head, for emotions have a tendency of being temporary when you're thrust into the heat of the moment. Then again, there are those times when keeping a closed mouth is damn near impossible, and this applies to everyone, no matter who you are or how level-headed you may regularly be. There's always something that strikes a nerve within you, causing you to react rather than think. The recipient of the tongue lashing should keep in mind this fatal flaw. There is a good chance they have succumbed to this tendency a time or two. After a while, you realize that every action or decision you make or choose not only to make or choose not to make is fully equipped with the consequence that you have to live with. After a while, you will realize that some of the easiest decisions you make in your life are often the hardest to live with. That what may make you happy now may not make you happy during your golden years. Perhaps a dream that you have that will result in the sacrificing of something your heart and soul truly desires. After a while, you'll come to the understanding that there will always be regret, no matter the choice. It is up to you to determine what regret you can live with and whether or not you believe it was worth the risk. There's always something that we can look back on and wonder, what if? After a while, you will realize that there will always be someone out there that judges what you do. No matter how hard you try, what you say, or how you say it, or even what you do, it will never change. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself, and if you're happy in what you do, then who are they to judge you? But if what you do hurts other people, who are you to judge their opinion and feelings? After a while, you will come into contact with individuals who have trouble interpreting or understanding the intention of what you say. Words are a weapon far stronger than any arsenal. After a while, you will understand that if someone was offended despite the intent, it is best to apologize. If you instead make excuses and try to justify your words or make light of the offense, it becomes a form of abuse known as gaslighting. And I try not to do that. But, yeah. After a while, you'll realize that pointing out differences in opinion will not result in an active discussion with anyone. It will, however, impugn upon their ability to think rationally or logically due to the extreme nature of their devotion and the stance. Not all disputes are reconcilable, despite how much you try to show compassion and understanding. After a while, you'll learn to walk away, or you'll learn to voice your different stance in your ways and fashions. After a while, you'll understand that discussions on politics and religions will ultimately leave you tied to a fence post if you choose to continue the argument. An argument over a strong opinion will result in extremely chafing of temperament unless you can break the chain and kindly remove yourself from the fray of snapping dogs. After a while, you'll realize that Robert Heinlein was correct when he said, an armed society is a polite society. Although Heinlein was referencing the ownership of firearms, it can also be interpreted within the realm of education. Being armed with compassion, education, empathy, and understanding will better equip an individual so that they can better communicate with individuals around them, although if you know someone is carrying. After a while, you'll realize that sensitive subjects have to be written about instead of brushed under the carpet and forgotten. Real issues deserve to be pointed out, highlighted, discussed, shared, and understood. There's only one way we can make a difference within a world that lacks empathy and understanding of the human soul. One need only take that Batman spotlight, fixate our symbols of what we stand for, and shine that thing right smack dab in the middle of the darkness. After a while, though, you'll realize that individuals believe that it's sometimes easier to avoid the conversation and forget. But in order to gain that enlightenment, in order to break out of those chains that are wearing through our skin and into our souls, is to face it and overcome it. After a while, you'll realize that people will disagree. The individual with the highest perception of the human soul and mind will understand that in order to overcome and move forward, one must suggest to agree to disagree to be more aptly suited. For what you stand for, as you hold true to your convictions, will speak more loudly than those whose stance wavers like the bending of a blade of grass. After a while, your stance, although strong, will face the rocks and boulders being thrown at you by those who oppose you. You could become that blade of grass and hide beneath or around the shadows of those rocks and stones. You could also become the stone yourself and become the statue that represents the strength that you hold by standing by your convictions. Do not allow the weight of negative reactions suppress your beliefs, because after a while, you realize that there are those who go in search of beliefs hidden under rocks. They will understand, they will know, and they will accept. After a while, you'll understand that if we continue to abide by cookie-cutter standards within ourselves and within our mind, what type of growth can we expect? After a while, you realize that those who are so consumed by their negativity will try to vanquish your heart through the sharp blade of their words. After a while, however, you will learn how to circumvent around those swings and master an all-new brand of emotional martial art and draw your inner strength from their words. After a while, you realize that good intentions aren't always the best intentions, and they sometimes have a way of backfiring. After a while, you will find out who your true friends are. Sometimes people say that they will be there for you no matter what and support you during your trials without fully comprehending what that entails. Forgive those who have abandoned you despite that careless phrasing of an empty promise. There are just some things that people cannot handle, and that is not their fault nor should be held against them. After a while, you will also realize that people have their battles to wage and cannot be consumed too much with yours no matter how badly you may need their assistance. After a while, you will find out that people handle situations and emotions differently. After a while, you may lose friends, but sometimes not because they want to leave you. After a while, you will realize that those friends left because they love you and don't want to see you hurt. Your pain and suffering have the propensity to destroy them as well. Without having the ability or power to intervene, they have only two options: leave and suffer the loss of the friendship, or remain and suffer the loss of a friend. After a while, you'll realize that sometimes you need to say unpleasant things to people. If you continually allow people to break your heart and walk all over you, they'll continue to do so until you stop them. After a while, you'll understand and accept that sometimes it's okay to lose your temper. Bottling emotions like perfume you spritz on yourself is no way to live freely. It's how you allow yourself to live within their chains. After a while, you will realize what is most important to you. It is within this epiphany where you will find strength to fight, the type of strength you never realized you had. After a while, you will understand what it means to be a parent and what it means to stand up for your family. When a child is threatened, beware of the mother bear that is lurking nearby. After a while, you'll realize that sometimes all you can do is pray. Pray for understanding, pray for the weary, pray for the strength, pray for courage, and pray for others who may do harm, whether or not the harm is intentional. Welcome differences, because it is our differences that you can learn. Some have ears to hear but do not listen. Some have love in their hearts but choose not to express it. Some have wisdom but lack understanding. Some are emotional but lack empathy or the ability to see from an alternate perspective and lack objectivity. After a while, the understanding and knowledge that you have attained will broaden as you age, and the list of insight and small servings of wisdom you have now will eventually grow into that of a banquet. Those who are older tend to be the wise ones, or the ones who are the wisest. The impact of your knowledge poses as a soup kitchen for those who are in need of it, that is, if they choose to listen. After a while, you begin to laugh at the naivete of youth. For those who are young believe that they know everything, but those older believe that there is still so much more to learn. Those who are young tend to look for what is easy in at least some ways. The older know that nothing worth having ever comes easy, and if it does come easy, it's not worth having. After a while, you'll realize that if you let it, the negative aspects of this prose may in fact happen. Perhaps they have the propensity to offend, or perhaps they have enlightened. After a while, I have realized that in order to stay true to myself, I must adhere to my convictions. I have still so much more to learn, and as the years progress, I too will develop a soup kitchen of wisdom, but that won't keep me from dining in others. After a while, you'll realize that there is always room for improvement, always enough kindness and forgiveness to go around, and there's always enough time to change. So that is The College Student versus the Soup Kitchen, written in 2012. I appreciate you guys listening, and honestly, I needed to go back on that because I got interrupted. I got to take my own damn advice because under the circumstances I'm in, I haven't and stuff, and I've learned that I show symptoms of autism, and that actually explains quite a bit. I'm an idiot savant. And there's so much more. I was actually looking for a notebook because I have more to add to that, but I consider that my living work. And considering the fact that it was written over 10 years ago and everything that I have learned up until this point, I have so much more to add to it that I've learned from my own experience, my own perspective, my own perception, the own lessons that I have learned. And that is my soup kitchen right there. My writing is my soup kitchen. And sometimes we need to go back and reread things like that because I have made those mistakes myself, which is why I wrote about them. And I made a few of those recently. So it was good that I was inspired to read that out loud to you guys, and obviously take my own advice. And remember that that I have so much more to add to it, and I can learn from my younger self. I was incredibly insightful back then. And I'm still quite insightful. But I have a lot more to add to that because I've learned a great deal in these past 10 years. So I wanted to share that one with you. I will put a link in the description box below for the original poem that inspired that. And I will talk to you guys later. Thank you for sitting and watching. Take care.